In working out where you could put a turbine, where might be a good place to put it, there's a thing called turbulence. That means messy wind, really. It means wind going in different directions, different strengths in different places, just all over the place. And that's very difficult to extract energy from efficiently for a turbine. It can even shorten the lifetime of a turbine, and it reduces the speed and the output. So you want to avoid places where the wind isn't flowing smoothly. Okay? Another example of that is if you've got something like a house here of size H, this is the area of wind that's affected by that turbulence, up to twice the height and 20 times downwind. It can be a really big effect. So in choosing where to put a turbine, you want to try and avoid any obstructions like that, or put the turbine up above them, a bit higher up. There are lots of other issues that determine where you might in practice put a turbine. Things you might want to talk about and think about a lot. Visual impact. Some people like them, some people don't. Where's it going to be seen from? Flicker. That's if light reflects from the blades. You can get a sort of strobing effect sometimes. Or if the light is behind the turbine, you can get it being blocked off by the blades. And planning regulations require people to do that sort of calculation and study and see who and when and if it might affect people and try and avoid that. So that will be thought about. The noise of the turbine is something you might want to think about. They're usually not that noisy. They're very little noisier than the background noise, because the wind itself, when it's windy, makes quite a lot of noise. And you've got waves here as well. The noise can be a little bit different though, so maybe you notice it a bit more to start with. It's just a bit less usual. You also need to put the turbine quite near where you're going to use the electricity, or at least connect the electricity to the grid. So you don't want it miles away, because then you've got to dig a very long trench and bury the cable, which makes it expensive. So that's something else to think about. There's also sort of landowner and access agreements, those kind of things. Who owns the land? You need to be able to do some maintenance, an annual inspection, maybe greasing the turbine, legal agreements. You don't want too many people near it all the time as well, just in case. So there's lots of things to think about, which these guys have been thinking about a bit more as well. So this is sort of a bit like Trinny and Susanna. This is what not to do with wind turbines, really. This sort of silly little turbine in the middle of a city, mounted on a roof, is a very bad idea. You get virtually no output from it, and it's very expensive. But you're in a completely different situation here. You have a great site, potentially. You could get quite a lot of benefit from the turbine. There's lots of reports saying that this sort of thing is a very bad idea. Right, so, costs and output. This is a picture of a turbine made by Proven, but we've got it up at CAT. So if you were to go, say, for a 6 kilowatt turbine, just as an example, that might cost about £20,000, but that's British Gas's money, or Scottish Gas, sorry. The turbine itself can be maybe about a third of the total project cost, because you've got to buy a tower, you've got to install it, and buy some wires, and do some design, and an inverter, and all those kind of things as well. But that's the total cost, that's an installed cost. So the turbine itself might be, I don't know, £6,000 or £4,000, something like that. It can be a smaller bit of it. I've done some just very rough estimations for what sort of output I think you might get here. And I'm pretty confident you'll get at least this. You might get a bit more even, but I'm definitely not exaggerating. I think you might get something like 1.2 to 1.8 kilowatts continuous average output from the turbine. Something like that. Which would be enough for something like 3 houses on the UK national average for all their electricity. There are economies of scale with bigger turbines. In terms of practicality, you're allowed to connect up to about 12 kilowatts with a 3-phase connection on site without any issues. You don't need to contact the electricity company or anything. If you did ever think of a bigger turbine, you'd need to look into that a bit more carefully. So that gives you an idea. It's a green light for something smaller than 12 kilowatts is pretty straightforward. And in terms of costs, I am only giving you some rough figures here, but if you had an average output of about 1.5 kilowatts, before the feed-in tariffs, this new government incentive scheme, that would, in electricity, it depends how much you use yourself and how much you just export to the grid, but it's something like £1,000 of income before the government support scheme for a turbine that size on this sort of site. And an annual inspection maybe costs £300 or something like that. So it's quite a long payback time. But the government have launched this new scheme now. You're going to get an additional 26.7 pence for every unit of electricity you generate, whether you use it yourself or sell it to the grid. And that's going to be for 20 years. So that would give you roughly an extra £3,000 a year from the turbine that you could use for community projects or reducing your bills or whatever. So the total income is even higher than that, depending whether you, as I said, use the electricity yourself or sell it to the grid. But if you use it yourself here, as I think the proposal is, that makes the economics even better, because you stop having to buy electricity at, say, 12 pence a unit. So you get an additional 12 pence a unit from it. So that's a really nice tie-up. And so it gives you a guaranteed payback. So that could be a very, very useful thing for you. Now the feed-in tariffs, that's the end of the wind bit. This is from the web page saying the amount of money they're paying for different technologies at different sizes. And it varies depending on the size and the technology as to how much money they might pay. Because some technologies at the moment are more expensive than others, and some give more output than others. So if you look at the wind bit here, a really small wind turbine, you get paid a bit more, but you get much less output from it. So in the sort of range you're looking at, it's this 26.7 pence a unit. And there is still support for bigger wind turbines. There's support for solar electric, so 36 pence a unit for if you were thinking about, is it 36? 36, if you're thinking about some solar electric as well. Don't see wave on there. But they're also thinking of launching a scheme like this called the Renewable Heat Incentive for clean heat generation as well, which we'll talk about a little bit more in a minute. This scheme will be reviewed every 5 years to see if the costs of some of the technologies have changed. But the idea is that they'll run for 20 to 25 years and you'll get a guaranteed payback, which is the same depending on technology. And I think this has cross-party support, so it's very likely to be maintained. Mainly the upfront grants have been removed though, because you're going to get the money from the generation. Although I think in Scotland there are still some upfront grants as well. So the money for this scheme is coming from everybody's electricity bill. So if you don't install any renewables, then you're paying for other people to install them. So given that you've got a good resource, it'd be nice to use it and get some benefit from